You already know what a Wolverine looks like. You've seen it maybe as a comic book hero's namesake, or as a strange, chunky animal in a wildlife documentary. Something between a small bear and a very large weasel, shuffling through deep snow in some remote, frozen corner of the world. You think you understand them. A mid-sized scavenger, stocky, a little fierce-looking, but ultimately just another mammal living quietly in the cold places nobody visits. That impression badly undersells what biologists who actually study this animal have spent decades trying to explain to a public that's never heard of most of what it's capable of. Because here is what most people are never told. The Wolverine, pound for pound, is regarded by wildlife researchers as one of the most ferocious mammals on Earth. An animal roughly the size of a medium dog that has been documented driving full-grown bears and entire wolf packs off their own kills, crushing frozen bone with a jaw built specifically for that purpose, and surviving alone across territories so vast and so brutal that almost nothing else its size can manage the same range. It is not a curiosity at the edge of the Arctic. It is one of the most disproportionately dangerous animals, relative to its actual size, in the entire mammal kingdom. To understand why, you first need to throw out any assumption based on the Wolverine's size. An adult Wolverine typically weighs between 10 and 18 kilograms, smaller than most domestic dogs, and a fraction of the size of the animals it has been documented confronting directly. It stands roughly 30 to 45 centimeters at the shoulder. By almost any conventional measure, this should be an animal that avoids conflict with anything significantly larger than itself. It does the opposite. Researchers and wildlife photographers studying Wolverine behavior across North America, Scandinavia, and Russia have documented repeated cases of Wolverines aggressively displacing animals many times their own body weight from carcasses, including brown bears, which can outweigh a Wolverine by a factor of 20 or more, and wolf packs, which possess overwhelming numerical advantage in nearly every encounter. Field biologists studying this behavior consistently describe it not as a fluke or a desperate last resort, but as a recurring, almost routine confidence the species displays when defending a food source it considers its own. This level of disregard for size disparity is rare enough among mammals that it's become one of the species-defining behavioral traits in the scientific literature describing it. What makes that confrontational behavior survivable, rather than simply suicidal, comes down to a combination of anatomy most people have never had reason to learn about. A Wolverine's jaw and teeth are built specifically for processing frozen carcasses, a problem almost no other predator in its range is equipped to solve efficiently. In the deep cold of its Arctic and subarctic habitat, carrion freezes solid within hours, becoming, for most animals, effectively inedible. The Wolverine's jaw structure and powerful biting muscles allow it to crack frozen bone and tear through meat that is hardened into something closer to stone, giving it reliable access to a food source that competing predators in the same ecosystem simply cannot break into. This single adaptation changes the entire calculation of every confrontation a Wolverine enters. It isn't approaching a contested carcass hoping to scavenge scraps. In many documented winter encounters, it may be the only animal present actually capable of accessing the most nutritionally valuable parts of the kill at all. A structural advantage that, researchers studying the species suggest, may partly explain why Wolverines display such consistent willingness to assert themselves against animals that would otherwise be expected to dominate the encounter outright. The Wolverine's claws and overall build add a second layer to this same picture. Semi-retractable and strongly curved, its claws are well suited for both digging through snow and ice and for climbing. Wolverines are capable, surprisingly for an animal of their size and build, of climbing trees and steep rock faces with real proficiency, a useful tool both for accessing food and for avoiding larger predators when direct confrontation isn't the chosen strategy. Combined with a low center of gravity, dense muscle relative to body size, and a thick, frost-resistant coat that allows it to remain active through extreme cold that would force most other mammals into shelter, the Wolverine is built less like a typical mid-sized carnivore and more like a compact, purpose-built survival machine for one of the harshest environments any land mammal regularly inhabits. Perhaps the single most striking fact about the Wolverine, and the one that best illustrates just how extreme this animal's lifestyle actually is involves the scale of the territory a single individual maintains. Wolverines are profoundly solitary and require enormous home ranges to sustain themselves, given how sparsely distributed food sources are across their frozen habitat. Researchers tracking individual wolverines via GPS collar studies in Scandinavia and North America have recorded home ranges exceeding 500 square miles for some individuals, among the largest territories documented for any land mammal of comparable size anywhere on Earth. A single wolverine may need to patrol and defend an area larger than many small countries alone, through conditions of extreme cold, deep snow, and minimal available prey, simply to find enough food to survive a single winter. This solitary, wide-ranging lifestyle means a wolverine is rarely operating with backup of any kind. Every confrontation with a bear, a wolf pack, or any other competing predator is one it enters alone, relying entirely on its own physical capability and apparent willingness to commit fully to a confrontation that, on paper, it should lose. The environment itself adds a layer of danger that has nothing to do with direct confrontation at all. Wolverines inhabit some of the most punishing climates occupied by any mammal: subarctic and Arctic tundra, high-altitude boreal forest, and deep snow mountain terrain across North America, Scandinavia, and Russia. Researchers studying wolverine population trends have specifically flagged the species' dependence on persistent spring snow cover for denning and reproduction, meaning the same extreme cold tolerance that makes the wolverine so formidable also makes it acutely vulnerable to a warming climate, eroding the very conditions its entire survival strategy depends on. This creates a genuinely unusual profile among dangerous animals, an apex-level competitor within its own ecosystem, equally capable of driving off animals many times its size, while simultaneously existing as one of the more climate-vulnerable carnivores researchers currently track, with population estimates across much of its range considered low and, in several studied regions, declining. Direct documented attacks on humans by wolverines are genuinely rare, far rarer than the species' reputation for ferocity toward other large predators might suggest. Wolverines generally avoid human contact, and confirmed cases of unprovoked aggression toward people are uncommon in the wildlife conflict literature, particularly compared to far more frequently documented encounters with bears or large cats. But wildlife researchers who study the species directly, and trappers and field biologists who have worked in close proximity to wild wolverines, consistently describe individual animals capable of remarkable aggression and tenacity when cornered, trapped, or defending a kill. Behavior entirely consistent with everything documented in their interactions with bears and wolves. The same animal that will stand its ground against an opponent 20 times its weight is not an animal whose physical capability disappears simply because the opponent, on a rare occasion, happens to be human. Here is what is true and what the evidence actually supports. The wolverine is not malicious, and it is not actively hunting humans in any documented or meaningful sense. The overwhelming majority of people who spend their entire lives in wolverine range will never have a dangerous encounter with one. This is, by every account, primarily an animal of remarkable solitude, built to survive conditions that would kill almost anything else its size, operating largely unseen across territory most humans will never set foot in. But it is also, by the consistent assessment of the researchers who study it most closely, one of the most disproportionately formidable mammals alive. An animal smaller than a medium dog that has been repeatedly documented displacing bears and wolves from their own kills, equipped with a jaw built to crack what ice has turned to stone, and willing, again and again, to commit fully to a fight that almost nothing else its size would even consider starting. Size was never the variable that mattered here. The wolverine simply decided, somewhere in its evolutionary history, that it didn't need to be bigger than its competition. It just needed to be willing to go further than anything else would.